we had another chai time. I just thought people would be bored of listening to Zoom, but we managed to put together such a great panel, and it's such an exciting topic. I couldn't sleep last night. I was so excited about this panel and asking these questions. So, you know, since we probably last came live, we've had the vaccine. Science is really hot. You know, chemists are, you know, the sexiest thing in town right now. You know, so it went from being quite a boring, you know, you're in biotech, so no, really, that's quite dull, to being like, oh, you're in biotech, you know, tell us about the vaccine. So, you know, the game has changed, and markets have been very hot in the last, you know, 1 year and more. And obviously that's what we're here to talk about. Boardrooms are buzzing. Every time I go to a board meeting, it's like, shall we IPO on AIM, NASDAQ? Do you think we can go onto NASDAQ? Do you think Zoom makes it easier for us to list on NASDAQ? So all these questions are being asked. Can we get the liquidity in the UK? Isn't the UK quite dull for a listing? Should we wait further, go onto NASDAQ? How hard is it? What are the costs? And so with all these questions being asked on the board, and I didn't have the answers, and I thought, well, we need to create a panel to get some of these answers. And so without further ado, I'd like to introduce our panel first of all, before we go into the questions. So I'll let everyone introduce themselves, but Sarah, who's the CEO of Arecor. So maybe just a little bit about your background. I mean, obviously I know you very well, and a little bit about the company.
Sure, thanks, Sunil. So my name is Sarah Howell. I'm the CEO of Arecor. So maybe starting with Arecor first. So Arecor is a clinical stage biopharmaceutical company, and we're very much focused on our mission is around transforming patient care, and doing this by taking already approved products that are on the market and in enhancing them using our innovative and proprietary formulation technology platform, Arestat. So in terms of our clinical stage products, we have 2 products in the clinic within diabetes. They're both insulin-based products. So here we're taking our Arestat technology platform and developing very fast-acting insulins. And this is important because it helps people with diabetes better control their blood glucose and stay inside a healthy range. So ultimately there to our purpose, improving outcomes and quality of life for patients. We also partner with major pharmaceutical and biotech companies. So this is where we're developing enhanced and differentiated versions of their products. And it's under a technology licensing model. So these generally are milestone and royalty bearing. So we have a revenue stream as well. And as you sort of mentioned as part of the topic of the panel, we recently at the beginning of June listed on AIM. My background is solely in pharmaceutical product development and commercialization, from GSK through UCB, most recently before Arecor at BTG. And then I joined Arecor. I took over as CEO in 2015.
Thank you, Sarah. I've got on my right, I've got Peter, who's been on the Chai Time before. Peter's the CEO of a psychedelic company now listed in Toronto. He's a founder of Small Pharma. Peter, quick intro.
Thank you, Sunil. So as Sunil says, Small Pharma is focused on psychedelic medicine. We have a lead product in the clinic. We've just finished phase 1 and entered phase 2A with a DMT-based medicine for use with psychotherapy to treat major depressive disorder. I came at this from the IP industry. I've worked in pharmaceutical patents for 10 years and set up Small Pharma with, you know, very much the same objective that Sarah described: finding new ways to deliver innovative medicines based on known active ingredients.
Thank you, Peter. And to my bottom right, I've got Tiffany, and I think she's coming in from Alderley Park or thereabouts, somewhere near there, up north. Tiffany has very recently listed on AIM. She's a CEO, a very young CEO. She's done an unbelievable job of getting this company off the ground, and a real true entrepreneur. And we backed her and her science. Tiffany.
Thanks, Sunil. So yes, I'm Tiffany Fawn. I'm the founder and CEO of a company called Bivitrix Therapeutics, which is based at Alderley Park, as Sunil mentioned, up north. in the UK. And I've been involved in the company. I actually set it up in January 2017 through to our very, very recent IPO onto AIM, which only completed in August this year. So we're still a relatively young and new company. Biovitrix is an oncology focused company. We are designing a pipeline of bispecific antibody drug conjugates, which we call Bisigny Therapeutics. And we've named them Bisigny Therapeutics because they're based on a very differentiated platform. So we're actually designing these molecules so that they specifically target our proprietary library of what we call cancer-specific fingerprints. So combinations of antigens that we've identified that are present on the tumour cells, not present on healthy cells. And so we're trying to design these molecules so that they have a much wider therapeutic index so that we can dose patients much higher without causing significant harm. We have a lead program, still at an early stage, but that's in acute myeloid leukemia. And we selected that indication because it's an area where biologics have typically failed in the past due to target-related toxicity. And then we have this wider pipeline of combinations across a range of different indications, different heme and solid tumor indications, and we're looking to bring a number of new programs forward quite soon. My background actually as a clinical immunologist in the NHS, and then I made the leap into industry and joined a CDMO focused on ADC manufacture, and then started Biovitrix. So yeah, that's
we're seeing quite a lot more in the ADC space. It's another chai time, but it seems to be the evolution of ADCs and how they've differentiated, tried to reduce side effect profiles, etc., in different ways. We've got this one, but there's others in the portfolio. I think that's sort of coming back into the space and back into vogue, and I think that we could see some other nice biotech IPOs in that area, in that space, and some good commercial partners as well. I think deals that will happen in the near future. Your chairman is also quite well known, Ian. So your chair is the one I actually spoke to originally. He's a chairman of Silence Therapeutics on NASDAQ, so he has quite a lot of experience of public markets. He's chair of a couple of other biotechs as well on the AIM market. So I think you've got quite a lot of experience within the company around raising money on public markets. So on my bottom left, I've got Michael, who's normally based in Boston, who's in Israel at the moment. And Michael is, as advertised, is not Michael, it should be Sharon, who's actually part of the same, they're both founders or co-founders of Karyopharm, although Michael tells me it's her company, I just joined her. But I know they were there from, pretty much the very beginning. Karyopharm is someone we've, a company we've worked with a long time and we've collaborated with. Sharon is incredibly driven scientist, entrepreneur. I remember when she was just designing the molecules through her sort of CompChem programs, and she designed, developed. Michael was obviously supported with the development activity, took the company onto a listing, and Michael was the CEO, president in the US as then when they actually listed on NASDAQ, and they actually went down the route of marketing and commercializing their product and building their own sales force, which we've got a ton of questions to ask around that and how that worked on NASDAQ, and I'm sure there's some very interesting discussion around that. Also, coming up to Sarah's point about being revenue generating, is that better for AIM? Is certain markets better for different types of companies, etc. So I'm joining you, by the way. I'm in Cambridge at the moment, and I would just mention that I'm in our new site in Hawkston. It's been a labour of love for a number of years. We bought the site 3-4 years ago. Prashant, my brother and co-founder, spent a huge amount of effort designing and intricately putting it together piece by piece. So we have an amazing building here where I work from day to day. So I'm fully at home now, out of the home. I'm fully in the office and loving, enjoying being in this building. And O2H as a group over the lockdown has sort of fared well. We survived it. We now have 18 investments from the fund. We have a CRO business with over 500 people in there between the UK and India. We have biology labs downstairs from here. So we kind of have this kind of Anglo-Indian model for supporting and developing early stage biotechnology companies. It's a bit of a mishmash. We've got CRO, but it all connects together very, very well, which is our vision from day one. And now we're living the dream and living the vision. So Prashant and I are both really enjoying running the company. So I'm going to go, first of all, It's a great time to IPO, isn't it? You know, every time I open my LinkedIn or Relay Pharmaceuticals or whatever, Oxford Nanopore in London, it must be a great time to get out there. Is the window still open? Is it closed? So it's really, the first question is around timing. And do you think it's a good time to list at the moment in the UK versus the US? So I'm going to first of all go to Sarah on that question. So you got out, you know, not too long ago, but you were saying you sort of rushed it out there because you thought the window was closing. So tell me about that.
Yeah, I mean, we made the decision earlier this year to go for an AIM IPO, and you know, we made that decision on the basis of we were looking obviously to raise capital, and we felt that AIM could support that and that we could access the capital that we needed. There, we raised 20 million, by the way. It was an oversubscribed round to really take us to our next value inflection point, which is essentially partnering value inflection points for some of our proprietary products, so the diabetes franchise, for example. But we made that decision in January, and we IPO'd at the beginning of June, so we moved quite quickly. And I think the reason, you know, we moved quite quickly, I think once you've made the decision, actually you want to grasp that opportunity. The window was certainly open. At that time, we were seeing there was still a need and a drive, and certainly investor appetite for good quality healthcare and biotech companies on the London markets and on the AIM market. So, you know, our strategy was very much, once we've made the decision, let's go as quickly as we can so that we grasp that window of opportunity, because you never know actually when it might start to close. Whether it's, I think it's slowing down now. I don't think it's completely closed, but I think it's certainly slowing down in London.
So I'm going to ask you another question. Why did you decide to go out on AIM? It's considered a sort of smaller market, maybe lower liquidity levels. Yeah. What was your reasoning for going out on AIM?
I mean, for us on AIM, it was really that basis of we were confident that we could raise the capital that we needed, and we're also confident in terms of a number of milestones and, you know, development milestones that we had upcoming through the year and moving forward now as well, which we've seen. So, you know, we IPO'd at a valuation of 62.5.
We'll come on to that.
Yeah, okay. And we, you know, we've had great clinical data that the markets have responded well to. So I think for us, it was around speed, access to capital, and being able to then focus on building the business.
Thank you, Sarah. So, so Michael, I mean, you went out on NASDAQ probably, I'm guessing, was it 2018,
13, no.
2013. Was it that long ago? Wow.
Long ago.
And
yeah, I mean, we were in the middle of clinical studies. We had responses. You know, I think these days investors, you can see reports of clinical trials. It's like we added 5 patients. We updated ESMO. At ASH, we had 5 more patients. You know, in oncology, it's like every PR and every CR is a big hoopla and big event. It's a bit crazier now than even then. Back then, we had a bunch of phase 1s going on in solid and liquid tumors, and we had partial responses and in a couple of cases complete responses, and with an oral new small molecule as a single agent in patients with refractory disease. So people took notice, investors got excited. I think that's true today. I think even today, if you have a cool technology, I mean, bispecifics, for example, in the oncology space are absolutely in vogue and super exciting. And, you know, this is a time to talk to bankers and get their opinions. And now bankers always want to do an IPO, but they really only get paid if they do it. So if you want to raise money, we all need money. And I strongly recommend that when you get something, you go and you get a few bankers and talk to them and see what they think is available. There is a little bit of a bipolarity right now, at least in the NASDAQ market. There are companies doing huge IPOs. It's not as open as it was several months ago, as Sarah said, but you get companies raising a lot of money, and then you get companies that are squeaking in and raising, quote, only 50 million or 75 million. But those financing events are what you need to keep the lights on and move things. So I think it's a good idea.
5 out of 8 biotechs, which are valued over 450 million on AIM, are actually dual listed on the NASDAQ and on AIM market. So it could be that, you know, Tiffany and Sarah may, you know, consider that actually. And a lot of our biotechs are thinking about, you know, should they wait a little bit further? How, what stage of a company do they need to actually list on NASDAQ? How difficult is the process? And you've actually been through that process. Can you maybe enlighten us a little bit of how that process works and how difficult it was?
Well, like I said, for us, we were in the clinic. We had a first and only in class, it's still the only in class oral small molecule drug that you guys, by the way, just to mention, I mean, Sunil said it, but we had a great relationship. I mean, part of the reason we moved from idea in 2009, mid 2009, this was a computer driven drug discovery program that my wife Sharon ran, to 300 or 400 analogs that O2H generated, to the point where KPT 330, Karyopharm 330, which was the 230th analog, became the clinical candidate in short order. We were in the clinic in 2012. So it was very fast, especially with small molecule chemistry and scale up and manufacturing and everything. I just
have to say a story on that, because it just reminds me. Sharon is one of the most driven entrepreneur scientists I've ever met. You know, she would call me up at 3 o'clock in the morning and say, "Hey, Sunil, I think your guys are having trouble spitting out these isomers or something. Do you think you could?" So she was completely on it, and nothing will get in your way. But to develop a drug and market it and get it through the whole machinery that quickly is really a credit, not to O2H really. It's although it's nice of you, it's really down to your team and they, you know, and the drive that you really need to be in this game. It's just not for the faint-hearted if you want to do it at speed and actually get your product to market. I'm sure the other entrepreneurs around the table will sort of agree with that. But yeah, thank you for that. I'm just gonna, on that note, go to Peter, because Peter is listed on the Toronto, and you reversed into, I call it a SPAC, but it wasn't a SPAC. You know, it's called something else out there. But you basically reversed into a company, and you had the option of maybe going onto NASDAQ. I would have thought you're in the psychedelic space. It's a very, very hot space right now. And we had this discussion, but you decided to go to Canada. So why? You could have gone to AIM or other markets. So why did you choose Canada?
Well, so we did look at a few different venues, including AIM, including US listings. At the time, there was one company listed on the NASDAQ developing psychedelics, and they were at a later stage. So we selected the TSX Venture Exchange largely because, as a phase 1 clinical company as we then were, Venture Exchange was well suited. Choosing a North American venue made it easier to speak to American investors. US biotech investors have been particularly interested in psychedelics companies, and the drug development space in general has been huge over the last 18 months. It was really to kind of access the best quality capital that we made the final decision on.
And did you consider AIM or NASDAQ? Did you sort of banter around? Did you talk to the analysts, and what they?
We talked to people in AIM, and I mean there were two drags on an AIM campaign. The first was that AIM markets have taken a kind of negative view to cannabis-based biotechs, whereas in contrast in Canada, cannabis-based biotechs have been financed, quite successfully. With a lot of volatility and a certain amount of kind of retreat from the markets, but Canadian bankers and Canadian
they're well used to it.
We're used to it. So psychedelics was a fairly easy step, and in the UK also, the effect of Brexit was that capital was less easily available at the time.
I mean, there's a number of ETFs now around psychedelics I've noted in Canada and elsewhere, and so if they can pick up small pharma as part of it's gives you a good base, a good amount of liquidity coming in, maybe. I
Yeah.
know that you're on one of the ETFs now. I just saw that. So, but you've got some hot for the press data, which we'll share in a second. So, but Tiffany, I mean, you went out as a very, very early stage company, and a lot of the biotechs will be looking at you and saying, "Wow, you know, you raised. I mean, you have a market cap of 12 million. Is that right? 12 point something million.
Yes.
So how much did you raise, and what was you? You know, this is very early for biotech. So why did you decide to go out at all?
Yeah, so probably similar reasons to Sarah, to be honest. But obviously, we're much earlier stage because we're preclinical. So we started. So I believe that we were the first company to start working on the concept that we're currently working on. It was unheard of when we actually started operations. But we were a small startup. We're now starting to see that a lot of large pharma companies and you know, some of the large mid-sized biotechs that are interested in biospecifics are starting to move into this area. And so we really need to compete with, you know, obviously these much larger organizations. And so we know that this is a hot area. We know we've got something here. We've already got a proprietary library of these targets that we feel other groups would be interested in. So we needed to move a lot quicker than we were doing as an early stage private company. So it was an unusual choice. It certainly wasn't on the cards from the beginning. But because of the speed and the access to, most importantly, the right amount of capital that we required at this stage, and we didn't want to continue to be drip fed money as a private early stage company, we felt like this was the right decision for the company. We knew it'd be challenging because we're early stage, but we took advantage of the way the markets had changed, particularly on AIM with the pandemic. And we went down this route, but timing was really important, as Sarah said. So we tried to sort of rush through the process very quickly. And that was hard with such a limited team because we don't have a CFO. I was the only person on the management team, so that was really difficult. But you know, again, it was important for us to remain competitive and to start to raise awareness of what Biovitrix is doing.
That's great. And in terms of liquidity on the market, I mean, is that a problem for your investors? How did you sort of decide who to invest, or how do you bring on to make sure you get some stability on the share price?
So we were quite lucky. So like Sarah said, we were quite surprised. We actually went out for a much smaller raise, and we were really heavily oversubscribed. So we were able to, you know, cut back on investors that we didn't think would be quite right, and taking more money from others. So we were able to balance out so that we could have some liquidity, but also have some long-standing investors, because we're an early stage company. We made that really clear to investors at that time. So we need to make sure that we are backed by investors that understand that story. But we are looking to improve our sort of retail investor base as well going forward once we get the name of the company out there, so that we can improve that liquidity.
I'm going to get onto some sort of volatility topics of share price, because I think yours has been fairly flat because no one's selling, or, you know, it's where it is. But I think, you know, just to move on to the other three, because they've experienced some significant volatility quite recently for all of them. So first of all, I'm going to go to Michael, because, you know, you were at one point, Karyopharm was valued at 1.75 billion, sort of in the discovery and development phase. But then, you know, you missed your numbers, or you had a couple of flat quarters, and you got absolutely hammered. You know, you're down to like 500 million or odd, and I'm sure you're on the uptrend again. So how do you manage that as a company? And you went from a discovery and development into marketing. Would you commercialize again? What do you think is the right thing to do for to manage your share price, and how did you deal with that?
Yeah, well, I have a little bit of I don't know if it's cynical or maybe it's just too scientific / medical view of the share price. It really follows your successes. So, you know, we came out when we went public, we were, I think, 300 million. I think we were public at 300 million with not that many outstanding shares. We did a great $125 million raise. It all was going well, and the stock climbed. It started at 16, it climbed up in the 20s. We put some data out at EHA based on 8 patients. And we've all had these stories. You know, the market's a bit crazy. We had 8 patients with refractory myeloma. 4 of them responded, 50% response rate, new target, and the stock went to 44 It doubled overnight, 48 actually. It doubled overnight. It traded 30 million shares, I think, which is a lot. Was a lot for us and a lot for that market cap. And you know, suddenly we're a almost $1 billion company based on 8 patients. And of course, the 8 patients was right, but the correct response rate is 26%, which is what we were approved on eventually. But that's what happens with small numbers, and that's what happens when people are afraid they're going to miss the train, as it were. So you got to have, you know, after you've been through this, and I've been through this is my 3rd drug approval, you just see this kind of zigzag in the market. We went through, you know, the down times when we came out with more data and the response rate was around 25%. You know, the stock crashed back down to 15. Then we had a study in AML where it looked like we were definitely overdosing patients. It's a tough area and it's a huge unmet need, as Tiffany knows well, and it's absolutely true. You know, we looked like we had sepsis, and the stock went down to, I think, 10. Just on that this whole drug was going to be killed because of this, and it turned out it was just overdosed in really sick patients that are older. Fast forward quickly, and I'm sorry to give a long diatribe, but this is the way the market goes, and you got to be ready for it. You know, we filed our NDA. The stock was 12. It looked good. Then the FDA documents came out, and the FDA just threw the kitchen sink at us. I mean, they just did not want to approve this drug, which in retrospect, I think they even admit they did approve it 3 months later than it was supposed to be. That was not the right decision, but they didn't get it, and the stock went to 4. And you know, we were bleeding. And believe me, as CEO, you've got your company screaming at you, you've got your investors screaming at you. You got to get ready for those days, because it's biotech, and that's what happens. You know, then the drug gets approved against everybody's belief. It's 12, and then that was accelerated approval. And then, to make a long story short, $28 after our phase 3 was positive, much to the shock of many people. We were a $1.75 billion company. And then it all became about what our commercial sales were going to be. And that as soon as you're commercializing, nobody cares about your development. They don't frankly care about your clinical data. All they care about is, what are you going to hit your numbers? And like Sunil said, with COVID hit, you know, our sales force couldn't get out there and evangelize the new drug. The sales didn't go up like that. So you got to stomach it. We're a $6 stock now, down from $28. And you know, it happens, but we have a great drug. So as soon as the docs start picking up on it, and now with COVID declining and all, we'll be back up there. But it's a seesaw.
I mean, you're a development, you're a clinician, and at that point, when it all became about the numbers, I think you actually went to the board and said, look, we need a commercial guy leading this now. And they said no, but we sort of pushed the point, but no, it's about numbers. We need someone who really, so that sort of changing guard, that change in management. Is it something that you think other companies should sort of follow, that sort of more that commercial role, making sure that's sort of high up in the company when it's about the numbers?
Yeah, look, I think a couple of things. One is that these jobs that we're all doing on here are too hard if you don't love them. And the 3 o'clock calls to you, Sunil, were preceded by the 2 o'clock a.m. wake up with me to discuss the data that led to the 3 o'clock call with you. So and that's what you do. And every patient that does well, you're up all night because you're excited about it. And every patient that crashes, you're down and you're up all night because you're depressed. And between Ambien and maybe a little bit of scotch, it can help you, but you got to love what you do. And for me, bringing a new drug to cancer patients is like I said, my 3rd drug. This is what it's about. Trying to convince the entire world to use your drug tomorrow is not what I do well. It's not what I love. And you should find somebody who does do that. I'm much happier. I'm in a clinician advisory role now in the company. I'm joining other boards. I'm meeting other people. I'm doing this with you guys. This is what I love to do. So I think that's the way to think about it. I do think when you're commercialized, especially if it's competitive, diabetes is super competitive, oncology is just getting more competitive every day. You got to think about it. Is this what I want to do? Would I re-commercialize again alone? That was our strategy. I'd probably do it alone. because I don't believe that anyone loves your drug as much as the company. But you got to be prepared for stuff like this. And I might be a little bit more, glass might be a little half empty, and I might be a little more eyes open about it.
So I'm going to come to questions. If there's anybody in the audience who wants to ask something, please go ahead and ask and stick it in the chat. So Sarah, a little bit about news flow. When you went public, you sort of had a plan of news flow, of potential sort of a pivotal data that may come through, which would be supportive, and it did work out positively for you, and your share price did rocket.
Yeah, I mean, as you said, so when we IPO'd, we were already in the clinic with our second diabetes product there. Of course, we didn't know at that stage what the data was going to be, and the data came out in September and was very positive. In fact, it's, fortunately exceeded our expectations there as well. And I think leading up to that also, we'd had, positive news flow coming through in terms of additional partnerships. We had 3 new collaborations that are under our technology licensing model with pharma. And we're able to name those, some of them with companies like Eli Lilly. So it's really validating the strength and the need for technology, which helps. Also approval from the FDA, IND clearance for our next clinical study for our first lead insulin products as well. So I think it was all building to really what the markets are looking for at this stage. I mean, we've only been on market since June, is that we can deliver what we said we were going to deliver, of course. And I think, as Michael was saying, you can't guarantee the outcome of a clinical study. Biotech, life sciences, there's inherent risk within that business, of course, and it's around managing those. And for us, our strategy is very much having a well-balanced portfolio of multiple product opportunities that we're controlling, but also partnerships with pharma here, so that there are additional opportunities, because not everything all the time will go as well as it has so far for Arecor. There's no doubt about it. And I completely agree with Michael. You've got to then weather that storm. And I think as a CEO, it's part of your role to make sure that you have that strength and depth in your portfolio.
I mean, you've got this sort of mixed portfolio where you have proprietary products which sucks up cash, and you develop them and you may get licenses and other things.
Yeah.
And then you have revenue generating collaborations, which the London market's like. They're not so used to biotech in general. That's what we've seen, and we'll come on to that point in a minute.
Yeah.
But, those revenue, if you look at the larger caps on AIM, the things like, they're all large revenue generating machines, and they actually do very well on AIM, whether it's an Abcam or a Fevertree or blah blah blah. So they seem to do quite well on the market. So having that revenue, I think London likes that. They like that sort of de-risk approach, and it shows that you can commercialize your project or product. But coming over to Peter on my right here, so you had fantastic, hot off the press. You had potentially good data on the phase 1. And your share price went the other way. So what happened?
So yeah, we completed our phase 1 at the end of last month, and kind of chose a dose which was well tolerated by. I mean, the exciting thing about this study is that it was the first time a powerful short-acting psychedelic like DMT had been tested in a clinical trial on psychedelic naive volunteers. So everyone that came to the study had never taken a psychedelic before, and it's an important question because we know that the majority of depression sufferers don't have any experience with psychedelics, and it's a major unknown because psychedelics haven't been studied for the last few decades. So it was positive, but it wasn't what we had raised the money on. So we raised the money to do a combined phase 1/2A, and the primary data readout on the phase 2A is going to be in the first half of next year, and that's what investors are watching and looking at. And one has to remember that there are multiple things that affect share price, and in biotech, and risky high growth potential companies, overall sentiment is huge, and biotech stocks at large have been down, I think about 40% from their peak this year, and that's affected our stock price as well. So, I mean, having a data readout isn't of itself going to increase the value of the company, at least the market cap of the company, but one can align a data readout with a financing or with a with a deal that reprices the company, and that can give a lot of buoyancy to the market, to the
yeah. So potentially it's actually a good time to buy small pharma. I mean, data's good. I'm not plugging it. I'm not giving investment advice, but it could be a cyclical thing, and so yeah, it could be an interesting time to look at it.
Couldn't agree more.
So we in the UK, we always beat ourselves up that we have great science in the UK, and we have a lot of new areas, cell and gene therapies, modality is small molecules, ADCs. We've got the whole gamut here really, and we're driven by a very data rich NHS, which has that longitude of data, that historical data. And so we're able to, I think, really punch way above our weight for the size of the country we are in terms of the quality of the science in the UK. I think that's a fact. I'm not here to pitch for the UK, but I think that's, we see unbelievable science in the UK. And I do a lot of the Boston, Cambridge travel, and we see good quality science in the US as well. But we do see it here, and the valuations are very, good. And you're developing the intellectual property for the same global market. It's not like you only file the UK. You're filing for the world. So why are
one particular plug is the patent box, which is always worth bearing in mind.
We've got the patent box, we've got R&D tax credits, we've got the EIS, as we're an EIS fund. So we have very tax efficient ways of investing, but also for the companies that I hear, it's a good place to be for biotech. However, although we're able to seed somewhat our companies, and probably not as much as we would all like, but we're able to seed or pre-seed the companies up to a Series A, and the majority of the seed money that goes into our early stage biotech is in that sort of, the UK investors do make up the majority of the money that goes into seed investments. And I think that's in no part down to things like EIS. But at the moment you move from the Series A onwards, the international investors take over. And the largest investor group that moves into UK biotech are the US investors. And then obviously, once they come in, you get very large Series B rounds. And we've seen a number of them across the board in the biotech space in the last year or two, massive rounds, hundreds of millions. And therefore, where do they go from there? Their only real route to exit is either some kind of M&A. And there are a few that go down that route, and there can be some large ticketed M&As. But then, the most likely, like an Accenture or someone, is to go on to NASDAQ. It's almost like the natural route. And in the UK, where, and at a government level, they're seeing what they can do to try and keep their biotechs in the UK, provide that scale up capital. And there's loads of initiative by the British about patient capital, et cetera, et cetera. But what would be really good is if we had a well-functioning market for biotechs. And now I'm going to sort of open it out really as to what we think we can do to fix our problem in the UK, and maybe convince our considerable bankers in the UK with deep pockets to try to understand this space more. Maybe it should be a little brother to NASDAQ in the UK. What is it we need to do here to fix this issue? And always we just go out to NASDAQ and it's too difficult.
So maybe I can start a little bit. I think, partly it's, you've slightly answered the question in a way. I mean, it is that access to sort of long-term capital of a magnitude that you can build, large sustainable businesses on, really. I mean, you talked about, going to those larger rounds, and then you get the US investors coming in. That's great. But actually, if we could build a UK institutional investor base there, so specialist, life science investor base that can, that you can access that capital at speed as well, and magnitude that's meaningful, then you start to fix some of that problem, and then the market function there and the public markets, in a sense, follow. But you need that access to large capital funds that you can access through, primarily if you look at the US or Far East as an example, where you can, and there are those institutional investors. So I think it's around really driving that investor base, and to a certain extent making it, things the government can do, making it easier for larger institutional funds, pension funds, etc., to invest in what's seen as a life science, riskier, although perhaps post-COVID not as risky as perhaps they once thought.
Michael, what do you think? Because you're on the other side of the, well, you're not on the other side of the pond at the moment, but you normally are, and you're on this side of the pond at the moment. But what do you think? How do you think we can fix our issue in the UK? And do you think we have an issue at all, and we should just go to somewhere else?
Yeah, well, I mean, we have the Mediterranean now between me and you, but that doesn't count quite as much as the pond. So one interesting thing I had, I mean, I probably met 10 different pretty good sized investors in London over on some ex-US road shows that I did. And one great thing about those meetings are usually an hour long versus a typical 30-minute meeting with a US investor. They're way more thoughtful, to be honest. They're more analytical. They are more skeptical, and they're more. I think they want a longer relationship. So one of the suggestions I have there, and I would do it again if I were a CEO even in the US, is to meet some of these folks more frequently earlier, so they can get to know you before they even are going to invest in you. But get down into the city. I mean, I don't know, outside of London, I don't know anyone, to be honest with you, but definitely met a lot. And I would get down and I would meet with these folks. Some of them are not going to take a meeting unless you're a bigger market cap, but some of them will. And if you have cool science and you sell it right, most of them will, because people just like to meet, especially I think the thoughtful European side. I will say, it's not just UK. In general, European investors fit that stereotype more than American investors kind of want you to come in, flash your flash, and get out. And they'll make much quicker decisions. I think in general, the UK investors and the European investors are a bit more thoughtful about it and deliberate, and they want to establish a relationship and draw sort of a line with you rather than just have the in-out, kind of thing.
Do you think the level of the questioning in terms of the science was similar on both sides? Or is it a very similar, but just more drawn out conversation? Do you think it's more technical in the US or vice versa?
No, I think it's more technical actually in Europe. I think they're more interested in the deep science. The preparation I had the preparation people did before I met them in London, I mean, I was getting some questions that thankfully I was there from the beginning of the company. I mean, I could answer. And I was on my own. I didn't have a CSO with me or Sharon or anyone, but I can handle that. So they tend to be much more thorough and detailed and understand it. I think their willingness to pull the trigger and their willingness to believe projections is way lower. Way higher. I mean, it's just tougher. It's a higher threshold. And I think the only way to really overcome that is to have develop a relationship with them. You got to know your stuff clearly. I mean, if you don't know your stuff, you're out. You're out. And bring somebody, if you don't know the science that well, or especially in early stage, you better bring someone who does, because they're not just all about the patent life and the finances of the company and they all know it's going to cost more and take longer in most cases. So you better have a foundation and a platform that stands up to their scrutiny.
Peter, maybe and I'm going to bring Tiffany as well on this. So, but I presume that you must be talking to North American investors, NASDAQ. A lot of your competitive companies that say with other psychedelics are on NASDAQ with much higher market caps. Is it something you've considered to switch over? And is it something that that would work for you? What are those discussions like?
Yes, it's certainly kind of under consideration. And I mean, coming back to your question as to what can we do to fix the markets in the UK, I would suggests that there's perhaps not as big a problem as might be being suggested. I think that there are certain traditions in the UK that have defined the markets, like favouring dividends over capital growth, and the the UK is a fantastic place to run a company. It's a really, really good place to run a company, and it's a good kind of global hub to access international capital. Capital markets take decades to kind of go through their cycles. And remember that the liquidity that we're seeing in the Nasdaq is not decades long. The Nasdaq is now kind of majority made up by 5 big tech companies, which was not the case 10 years ago. People often say that London lags Silicon Valley by 10 years. So, I think, watch this space.
And Tiffany, is it something you've considered moving over to Nasdaq, and have you had experience of trying to fundraise on both sides?
To be honest, I mean, obviously, because we're the other end of the spectrum in terms of early stage, I'd say that the biggest problem from our side is bridging that, what we always call the valley of death, which is from your seed round to even reaching your Series A. And we really struggled with that, several years ago, because we weren't an academic spin out, we were an industry spin out. So we weren't incubated and able to generate a certain amount of data in that company. So we were a concept when we spun out. So the seed capital was easy to get hold of. We met all of our milestones. We did that on time, under budget. But the actual funds to then take that forward from the specialist investors weren't really there. And I think we're too risk averse in the UK. So compared to the US, and I have very little experience of raising money in the US, but my feeling is that over here in particular, we're too slow and we're too risk averse. And I think, we need to become a bit more aware of what a life science company requires in terms of the timelines, realistic timelines and realistic capital requirements. Because I think we're seeing with not Biovitrix, but with fellow companies that I'm aware of, they'll have a certain amount of investment. They've done exactly what they said, but the investors get quite itchy feet, and they're wondering when the revenues are going to come in if it doesn't happen exactly when you said it was going to happen. So I think just having that understanding, and again, this might just be an assumption, but I feel that in the US we see companies at our stage with our level of data that are raising significantly larger sums of money, and you need that to build the team that's actually going to deliver upon a concept. It's so difficult. If you get 12 months cash runway, how do you build the team that you need with that short runway? And that's why we went down the IPO route. So again, I don't have experience of raising money in the US, but those are my assumptions. And I think, certainly for a company, if you're a life science company of a certain size, then, most people want to go to NASDAQ. So that's my opinion at the moment.
Michael, would you do it again at the stage of company that you're at? Would you again go onto NASDAQ, or would you keep it private longer?
No, we wanted to blow out the development of this drug. I mean, the problem in oncology is, it's $120,000 per patient, all told. If you need at least a few hundred patients to get an approval, and you probably need closer to 400 or 500 patients. And if you start doing the math, you just got to have $500 million raised, and then you got to get commercial if you're going to do that, or partner, or sell the company. So it's like it's a gas guzzler, as we say in the business, and you need access to capital. I mean, that's what we need to do it. So I would absolutely do it. I would do it at the time that we did it. I think you got to be opportunistic these days. If you have a cool new platform, and there are gene editing companies that were 2.5 years away from the clinic that went public, and crazy stuff. But that's why you just talk to the bankers. I mean, no banker is going to ever turn you down, because that's their business, is to make money, and they're going to list you somewhere. And you're going to pay your audit fees, and you're going to do all the annoying things that public companies do. But at the end of the day, you need access to a lot of capital. Oncology is one of the worst, but most things just cost a lot of money, like Sarah said, and you just got to get access to it. So
I mean, the fees on the NASDAQ listing are probably sort of 10-12% versus maybe low single digit in the UK. So there is a higher cost of listing. But like when I asked you about this earlier, Mike, I can't even remember because it wasn't, you know, that's the cost of doing business. That's what you need to do to get out there.
Yeah, everybody. I mean, everybody goes through it, and it's the same thing. I think one thing you asked before, which is very helpful, if you can get the round oversubscribed, and it's great because that's the only way to pick your investors. I mean, I think I did 5 capital raises between the IPO and my last raise, which was at $24 a share, which was great. But we had one capital raise that was not good and was not oversubscribed, and it was 1.3x, but frankly, 0.4 of it. So 0.9 was good and 10% sucked. It was 1.3x oversubscribed, but frankly, 40% of it sucked. And we ended up with some, you know, lousy investors, retail stuff mostly, and they're shorting the stock and they're flipping the stock and they're playing all kinds of games. And again, you just got to be a grown-up about it. And next day the stock is down 20% because you got some lousy investors. So if you have it, if it's hot and it's oversubscribed, you'll get the good investors. If it's not, you know, you take your you get the money, but your investors take it on the chin until you can create more value to bring it back up.
Well, you need to fill, you know, the vast majority of the round with good institutions. You know, if you can, there's nothing wrong with retail appetite, but you kind of want it mostly in the aftermarket.
I mean, you had a solid biotech investor coming into you, didn't you, Peter, at the pre-round?
Yeah, we're not allowed to say who, but yeah, we had 70% of the round kind of anchored by, you know, long hold, respectable biotechs, and that allows you to.
It's lucky I didn't say who then, because I was just about to mention. I didn't know it was confidential. I thought they could look up on the cap table, but anyway. Look, we're getting towards we're over time. We've got a question. Let me just see. We're going to close out soon, but just to see if there's any. Got a few raised hands here. I can't work it out, but oh, here we go. So yeah, it would be nice to hear on key takeaways of going public on NASDAQ or AIM, other stock exchanges. So that's from one of our team. So I think final closing words, just a summary of where you are with your company and your final takeaway on going public. Is it a good thing or bad thing for you guys? So just final words and then we close it out. Sarah.
Yeah, shall I start? I mean, you know, I think for us, as I said, early so far as public journey, but definitely positive, you know, and it was all around raising the capital that we need. So now, you know, it's within our hands really to use that capital to add the value to the company, develop our products. The team are super excited because, you know, that kind of funding cycle is off the table and we're basically saying, okay, let's go for it. And we know we've got, you know, innovative products that everyone believes in. So from a purpose perspective in the company, it's been great because you can say, look, this is our purpose. And now we're equipping everybody with what they need to really move forward and deliver on that. So I'd say, yes, definitely would do it again. And maybe ask me in a year, I might say something different, but yeah, definitely.
Well, you know, we've followed you, we've got investors in the company, and we've really enjoyed the journey with you at the helm. You've done incredibly well to get this away, and some nice data coming through, great partnerships and collaboration. So we're very proud to be sort of part of that story. Peter?
Oh, I would do it again in a second. No regret at all.
And in Toronto or somewhere else?
Yeah, well, Toronto was the right place for us at the time. And I mean, what Sarah said is absolutely right. You know, financing is key. You can't expect the markets to anticipate good scientific readouts. So, you know, it is our responsibility as biotech leaders to, you know, select the right market at the right time, and a public market can be the right place at the right time. Yeah, I think that's.
So, you know, again, I want to echo, it's been great being part of the story there with you guys. You know, psychedelics is super hot. It can make a massive difference to patients with depression. You have a product that has intellectual property around it. You're a very smart chemist and legal person, lawyer, patent attorney. So you have, you know, you come from a very sort of clever way. And I think that, you know, the phase 1 at Imperial getting through that has been amazing. So I think you're on a really sort of fantastic journey there in a very hot
We've great
space.
seed investors in O2H, backing us since 2016, I think, before anyone knew what psychedelics were.
Thanks, Peter. Again, Tiffany, final words to you.
Yeah, well, obviously, like Sarah said, it's early days, but so far, you know, really positive experience. After doing 4 private rounds, I think I actually preferred doing the IPO, which I'll never believe that I'm actually saying. I think it's just been a game changer for Biovitrix. We're finally able to grow the team and the skill set that we need. I think we can raise the profile of the company. I feel now that we're going to be competitive against, you know, some of the bigger companies that are looking to turn to this space. And yeah, I guess watch this space. We're doing quite a lot of work at the moment, so hopefully next year we'll have a lot of positive news flow that can raise the value.
Yeah, no, I think the ADC space is incredibly exciting, and you've got some differentiated platform there. We're investors in the company. We're not selling. We invested pre-IPO, and we're hanging in there for the long run on this one. We think you've got a long way to go, and you've got, you know, great future ahead of you within Biovitrix. And Michael, last words to you.
Yeah, like I said, I don't think you have much option in this business. You either raise the money or you get bought or do a partnership. I will quickly add, I mean, it's a longer discussion, but, you know, partnerships are always great until the ink dries, and in my opinion, and it's, you know, you wouldn't give away your kids generally for someone else to raise. And so you really have to think real hard about that. And basically you have a choice to stay private. Like Tiffany said, private is brutal. I mean, it can feel good, but when you start to get into bigger numbers and people feel they really own you, at least public investors understand that it's a little bit more it's a lot more arm's length, and it's easier, and you can almost always fund a company publicly. So I strongly advise it. I think you got to talk to bankers early. I think you should try to talk to as many good investors early. And I think I would definitely do it again. And I think we have to keep coming back to the public markets until we can pay for our own development.
Yeah, thanks, Michael. It's been great for you to come on. I mean, Prashant and I, basically, you probably don't even know this, but we bought the shares probably twice now, or 3 times or something. We obviously want to be a part of your story. We love the fact that you've designed, developed, and marketed a drug from scratch. We feel very proud to be associated with that. So, look, you know, I want to thank you all for coming on. It's been a fun discussion. Really enjoyed it. Appreciate all your time. And for there will be another chai time soon. We're just deciding on the we're thinking of doing it on hit finding, so it could be more of a sciencey one, but we'll come back to you on that one shortly. Thank you so much, guys. Enjoy the rest of your day. Oh, by the way, we're not. I don't know if I need to give a caveat, but I'm going to give it anyway. We're not providing investment advice to anybody. Everyone should make their own decisions before they buy into shares. Don't worry about what I said. You know, I'm obviously affiliated with all these companies and we're saying very nice things. Make your own decisions before you buy and sell shares. Don't come back to me. Thank you.
Great. Thanks.
Bye.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.
Cheers.
Bye.